Welcome to another week of middle school ministry from Mount Pleasant Christian Church. My name is Mike Sheely. I'm the middle school pastor, and as we're recording this, it is March Madness, the first weekend of it in 2021. I know that might mean that if you're watching this on the day it airs or that same week that your brackets might be busted already. There's been some crazy upsets already, but just remember, if you want to cheer for your youth pastor's team from my home state of Illinois, cheer on the orange and blue. We're still in it, still a number one seed and going all the way. So cheer for the Illini. Let me know in the comments on Minga what your team is, and we'll see how it turns out at the end of March Madness. All right? Okay, on to other things. I mentioned Minga. We got a way for you to share, answer questions, interact with us. That's minga.io. You can find that there on the screen. We're going to get into week 3 of our Lost and Found series. So let's start off right away with the question. What is something you threw away and later wished you hadn't? I know when we used to do out to lunch events in the summer, it seemed like every summer somebody threw away a retainer. We had to dig through the trash to find it. So what's something that you threw away and wished you hadn't? If you want to post that on Minga, that question's on there. I don't have a great story of throwing away something I shouldn't, although I'm sure over the years I have. But I do have a story of losing something very valuable and very important to me. So let me give you this true story of what happened when I was in middle school. My family went to an event in Milwaukee, Wisconsin called Summerfest, where it was a big music festival, a lot of concerts, a lot of food, a lot of fun. And this particular summer, my friend Mark got to go with me. And so my parents kind of let us wander around this big festival, doing all kinds of fun stuff, and we check in with them every once in a while. While we were there, we saw a lot of concerts. I remember seeing one concert. We made a bad decision, and we sat almost right in front of the speakers, and our ears just rang the rest of the time. It was so hard to hear. Very, very dumb. But a lot of music, a lot of people. You can see this is just one little shot of part of the crowd there at Summerfest. Tons and tons of people. Obviously, this is before COVID and before social distancing and all that kind of stuff. And at the end of the day, we were walking back to go meet up with my parents, my family, and I realized I had lost my wallet. And I had a significant amount of cash still in that wallet from the day. And so I was like, Mark, we got to find this. And so we went and looked around. We retraced our steps. It had been a crazy day. We'd watched some BMX X Games athletes doing some bike tricks. We'd watched some concerts. We ate some food. We'd played some video games in the arcade. We'd kind of wandered around the whole grounds. We'd covered a lot of territory in that day and tried to figure out where I lost it. Just had no idea. We met up with my family. We went to the little police station they had set up there on the site. We reported it lost, and that's when someone handed it to me. It had been turned in. It turns out that Mark and I had been pretty tired just from the long day, and so we took a moment and just laid down on some picnic table benches just to chill out and relax, and I didn't know it at the time, but my wallet had fallen out of my pocket while we were laying on the bench. It landed on the ground. After we walked away, far enough away that no one knew that we had been there before, a little girl and her dad had come by, and she had found it on the ground, and they had turned it into the police for us, and so my wallet with all the cash still in it had been found, and we got to make our way home. And that was quite embarrassing to have lost that, trying to be responsible, but it was great to have that found. Have you ever felt ashamed of losing something valuable? Has that ever happened to you? Maybe they trusted you with something that wasn't yours, and you lost it. Maybe it was something that you just got for a birthday or for Christmas, and then all of a sudden it was gone. Earbuds or a phone or something valuable. It's a horrible feeling to lose something like that, right? But we talked about in this series that sometimes we feel lost. Not just that we lose things, but sometimes we feel lost. And sometimes that can be because we don't feel noticed. We feel like no one even knows I'm here. No one sees me. No one even knows I exist, we might say, when we feel lost. Or it might be that we feel like we're not valuable. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not important enough. I'm not successful enough. And so I'm just not valuable. And I feel kind of lost that way. Or it might be in our lives that we feel lost because we've messed up. We've done something wrong and we don't know how to fix it. And so we kind of feel in this lost place right now. Well, here's the deal. We're going to talk about a guy today, a younger brother of 2 brothers, and his story, and see if we can kind of connect and help you out with part of that situation. Because sometimes that lostness can happen with you and someone you love, right? You've broken some trust, you said things you shouldn't have, you've hurt them, and now there's a gap between you and that person, your family, or your friend circle, and you've hurt them or they've hurt you, and there's this separation that's going on. Maybe you feel distant from God. Maybe you feel like, well, I haven't been at church for a while, or man, doing this worship from home thing just doesn't feel the same as being there in person. And God, why hasn't this all been healed and covered and taken care of? And just what is going on? And maybe you've never even felt close to God in the first place. But whatever is going on, that separation isn't between you and a person, it's between you and God. Maybe you've made a mistake, whether that's towards God or towards a person, and that mistake makes you feel like there's a distance, like you've got to pull away. You can't be as close as you used to. Well, all month we've been in this book of Luke. The doctor who wrote a story about Jesus' life, the true story, his biography, and in it, he captured a moment where Jesus is telling 3 stories. He's just making these stories up, but he's making them up to make a point. And in chapter 15, you can find all 3 of these stories: the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the lost son that we're going to get to today. He's telling parables. These are stories that he makes up, fiction, not true. What we're talking about today, the son, this never happened. Jesus telling the story, that happened. But the story is told to make a point. Remember, Jesus is talking to the Pharisees. They were all upset about who Jesus was hanging around. They had missed the point that he was trying to bring help and hope and love to those who were lost and broken and hurting. And all they saw was people that were imperfect and sinners and who didn't measure up to their standards. So sad. And so Jesus, instead of arguing with them, he tells 3 stories to help them understand why he's doing what he's doing. He tells the parable of the lost sheep, how a shepherd had 100 sheep, and 99 were still there, but one was lost. And so he leaves the 99 to go searching for that one. And he showed us how valuable each one of us are in the eyes of God. And then he told the story of the lost coin, this woman who had 10 coins and she lost one, and whether it was sentimental or actual value, it didn't matter. She lit a lamp and she swept and cleaned the entire house to find this one lost coin, teaching us and the Pharisees how much God searches for those of us who are lost, no matter why we're lost. And then today we're going to look at one last section, Luke 15. We're going to start in verses 11 through 19 and read the last story he told that day, and then see what kind of a point he made and how that helps us today. So, dig in with me, Luke chapter 15, verses 11 through 19. To illustrate the point further, Jesus told them this story. A man had 2 sons. The younger son told his father, "I want my share of your estate now, before you die." So his father agreed to divide his wealth between his sons. A few days later, this younger son packed all his belongings and moved to a distant land, and there he wasted all his money in wild living. About the time his money ran out, a great famine swept over the land, and he began to starve. He persuaded a local farmer to hire him, and the man sent him into his fields to feed pigs. The young man became so hungry that even the pods he was feeding the pigs looked good to him, but no one gave him anything. When he finally came to his senses, he said to himself, "At home, even the hired servants have food enough to spare, and here I am dying of hunger. I will go home to my father and say, 'Father, I've sinned both against heaven and you. I'm no longer worthy of being called your son. Please take me on as a hired servant.'" That may be a familiar story to you. And it's easy to hear this story and go, man, what a fool. He treated his dad like he was dead. He went off and spent all this money. He ends up having to take care of pigs. And now he's at a point where he wants to come home and say, "I'm not good enough to be a son anymore. Can at least be a servant." We can point our finger at this guy, this runaway, lost son. But let's see if there's anything that connects with our lives. This son is impulsive. He's making a decision without getting any kind of advice or guidance or direction. He just knows that, you know what, it looks like it'd be so much fun to go over there, wherever those distant lands were, and to do whatever people do over there in that wild living. And so he says, I want some money. I want to go do this now. And he's hurtful. Did you catch it? When you get an inheritance, that's something that people give to you when they die. He's asking for his father's inheritance now while his father is alive. He's saying, I'd rather have the money that you're going to give me when you die than have that relationship with you as father and son. And so he basically asked his dad to pretend he's dead so that he can have his money. He didn't think through how that might have hurt his dad. Have you ever said something that was hurtful to someone? I have. And then selfish. He goes and spends it all on himself. He goes and is involved in this wild living in this foreign land, and it's all about him and what he wants to do. Hey, have you ever made a decision that was selfish? Something that was just all about you? I have. So if I stop and think about it, I've got more in common with this younger son in the story than I'd like to admit sometimes. Well, here's the deal. There's more to the story. Let's pick it up in verses 20 through 24 and see how this part of the story ends. Remember, he wanted to go home and be a servant. So the son said he returns home to his father. And while he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming. Filled with love and compassion, he ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. His son said to him, remember, he had practiced this, "Father, I've sinned against both heaven and you. I'm no longer worthy of being called your son." And the father cuts him off. But his father said to the servants, "Quick, bring the finest robe in the house and put it on him. Get a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet. Kill the calf we've been fattening. We must celebrate with a feast, for the son of mine was dead and now is returned to life. He was lost, but now he is found." So the party began. Can you imagine being welcomed home like this? Can you imagine going and being so impulsive and hurtful and selfish and coming back to apologize and try to make things right for what you messed up, and instead of someone listening to you and telling you how horrible you were, you're welcomed with a hug that says you're loved and with these symbols that say you're part of the family. You're welcomed home. Remember, this wasn't a real story. This didn't actually happen. Jesus told this story to make a point. He wanted the religious leaders to see people the way God sees them. When you mess up and you come back home to God, He's not sitting there waiting to point out how wrong you were. He's waiting to welcome you back into the family. He's not sitting there ready to lecture you for how much you've messed up. He wants to throw a party because you're found. Just take a moment and think about how great it is to be welcomed by a God who loves us that much. The Father hugs the Son. He gives them this ring and this robe and these sandals that they say, you are a son, not a servant. You're part of the family. Jesus wants to welcome you back the same way when you feel separated or lost or apart. What does Jesus' story about the runaway son teach us about who God is? Well, I think it teaches us how God welcomes us. But I wonder how good we apply that lesson. If someone is welcoming, they make you feel at home. If you come into our church services in the main building, there are people there to greet you at the door, to welcome you as you go into the worship center, to help you find a seat if you're new and don't know where to go. They want you to feel comfortable and at home like you're part of the family. But in our notes, in the Bible app and the weekly that we have a lot of questions about how welcoming are we? When you come into the Student Ministry Center, if you're there for an in-person service, do you keep your eyes open for someone who's new or doesn't know if they belong? Do you intentionally welcome people so they feel home? Or do you look for people, and if they haven't been there for a while, is your first response, "Wow, it's so good to see you"? Or do you say, "Man, you've been gone a long time. Why have you been here?" That doesn't make someone feel welcome. But it doesn't have to be just here at church. What about at home or on your team or your school, your neighborhood? Someone you haven't seen for a while. Someone new moves in the neighborhood. Somebody new joins the team. Someone new is in your class. You hop on Zoom and you see somebody you haven't seen for a while. Do you reach out to them to make them feel welcome? That's what Jesus wants us to do. He wants us to welcome others. Remember, the son was trying to apologize. The father didn't let him. That didn't matter. What mattered was that he had been lost and now he was coming home and he was welcomed and embraced. Can you love other people the same way? Jesus welcomes you back, and he wants you to welcome others. This week, what will you do to welcome others in the same way that Jesus welcomes you back? Maybe you've got a brother or a sister, someone in your family that there's been a problem between you. Can you take a deep breath and welcome them? Hug them. Do something nice for them. Play with them. Talk to them. Can you love them as family? Maybe there's been a bit of a rift between you and your parents, something that you've said, something that's happened, and maybe even something that they've done, because us parents aren't perfect either. Can you forgive and love and embrace and be family? Maybe there's a friend you haven't talked to for a while because of something they said or posted or a comment they made or a comment they posted. Can you love them and welcome them? What can you do this week to be like Jesus and to welcome people, to make them feel home? Imagine you walk in the door and someone says to you, "Man, I haven't seen you in a long time. What's been wrong with you?" Or you walk in the door and someone says, "Oh, it is so good to see you." And they give you a giant bear hug, whether you like hugs or not. I think I'd like that response better. I want to be welcomed and made to be feeling at home. How different would your family, your neighborhood, your team, your class, your circle of friends, how different would those situations be if you were welcoming and help people feel at home? Not because they're perfect or because they apologized, not because they obeyed all the rules or because they finally got their act together and met at the time they're supposed to meet, but just because, like the Father, you were looking out to welcome someone who wanted to be home again. How awesome would that be, to be used by Jesus to welcome someone that way? Let's pray. God, it's easy to listen to a story by Jesus and just enjoy the story for entertainment's sake. It's also easy to think about the people in the story and to point our fingers and point blame and be disappointed in the Son and frustrated with him. And we end up seeing that we have a lot in common with him. But we also can choose to be like that Father and love people and welcome them the way God wants us to, so that they'll know that God welcomes them too, so that Jesus welcomes them home. Help us this week. We don't know where that might be, who that might be with, to love and forgive and accept and embrace and welcome and celebrate when the lost are found. Amen. Hey, that brings us to the end of our Lost and Found series. I want to remind you, you can go on and post some of your questions and thoughts on Minga. And next weekend is a wacky weekend. This little picture on the screen here gives you a little bit of a clue, some stuff that we're going to be doing in person at the Student Ministry Center. And what we're going to do is we'll have a teaching video online still on Sunday at 10:15. And we'll link to some of the games that we're playing. So if you want to play them at home, you can grab those and play them during the week or later on Sunday. I hope that you're having a great spring break. Whether you're enjoying basketball and March Madness or not, hope you get to get outside, enjoy some of this amazing creation with the good weather we're supposed to have. And if you're watching this later, thanks for checking this out. Know that Jesus welcomes you, and I hope that you can welcome people like Jesus does for us. I'll see you next time.